There is a strange pattern that repeats itself in offices, friendships, families, and relationships. A person can remain present for years, quietly solving problems and holding everything together. And slowly, almost without anyone noticing, that person becomes invisible. Then one day they leave, and suddenly everyone begins to notice. The calls begin, the apologies arrive, compliments appear that were never spoken before. People say, "We didn't realize how much you were actually doing." It seems as though absence has transformed an ordinary person into someone valuable. But that explanation is incomplete, because disappearing does not make everyone valuable. Some people leave, and almost nothing changes. So the real question is not simply why people value you after you leave. The real question is what your absence reveals that your presence managed to hide. Imagine an employee named Daniel, a composite of a pattern found in countless workplaces. For 5 years, Daniel works for the same company without becoming the loudest person in the room. He does not control the meetings or constantly remind everyone how busy he is. But when a client has a problem, Daniel is usually the person who answers. When a new employee is confused, Daniel quietly explains how the system really works. When two departments misunderstand each other, he translates what both sides actually need. He remembers the passwords nobody documented and the deadlines that can never be moved. He notices small mistakes before they grow into expensive problems. Most of this work is never formally assigned to him. And because he performs it consistently, other people stop experiencing it as work. They begin to experience it as normal life. Then Daniel resigns. His manager shakes his hand and wishes him luck. Nobody panics. At first, everything appears completely normal. Then the questions begin, and the ordinary system slowly starts to break. At first, the question seems small. A missing report, an unanswered email, a delayed client response. Nobody connects these problems to Daniel, not yet. But as the days pass, small interruptions begin turning into larger failures. Deadlines are missed. Clients become impatient. Mistakes multiply. It feels as though the company has become less efficient overnight. But nothing changed overnight. The change had been building for years. The company had slowly stopped seeing the work that prevented problems from happening. Success often hides the effort that created it. And that is where the first illusion begins. People assume that valuable work always looks important. In reality, the most valuable work often looks completely ordinary. Because when someone consistently prevents chaos, there is very little chaos left to notice. Their success erases the evidence that they were needed. And over time, extraordinary reliability starts to feel ordinary, until the day that reliability disappears. Human attention was never designed to notice what remains the same. It notices change, a sudden sound, a flashing light, an unexpected silence. The brain constantly filters out what appears stable so it can focus on what might require action. The more reliable something becomes, the less attention it often receives. Not because people are cruel, but because the mind is efficient. Think about the sound of your refrigerator. You probably don't hear it anymore until it suddenly stops. The sound was always there. Your brain simply decided it no longer deserved your attention. People often become part of that same background without realizing it. Not because they lack value, but because they have become predictable. The extraordinary slowly becomes ordinary when it happens every single day. Psychologists sometimes describe this process as adaptation. We gradually adjust to what once felt exceptional. The promotion that once made you proud eventually becomes just another job title. The new apartment becomes your normal home. The dream car becomes your daily commute. And the person who quietly supports you every day slowly becomes part of the scenery. Until one day that support is gone. Only then does the brain notice the gap that had been hidden by routine. Absence changes what your attention can finally see. And that is only the beginning of the story. There is another reason people suddenly recognize value after it disappears. The human mind reacts differently to losing something than it does to gaining it. Something you always had rarely feels as valuable as something you suddenly lose. As long as Daniel was there, his contribution felt normal. After he left, every unfinished task pointed back to him. His work had not become more valuable, it had simply become visible. Sometimes the easiest way to measure value is to remove it. Only then does everyone discover how many things quietly depended on it. But there is an important mistake people often make here. They assume that leaving automatically creates value. It doesn't. Absence cannot manufacture importance where none existed before. It can only reveal the importance that had already been there all along. That is why some people are deeply missed, while others disappear without changing anything at all. Some of the most valuable work inside any organization is almost impossible to measure because it happens quietly in the background. It doesn't appear on financial reports or performance charts, yet the entire system depends on it every single day. Sometimes, the most valuable contribution is simply making sure everyone else's work happens without interruption. A question answered before confusion spreads can save hours that nobody will ever remember. A tiny mistake corrected today may prevent an expensive crisis tomorrow. A calm conversation can stop an argument before anyone realizes it almost happened. A single phone call can save a client relationship that everyone else believed was already lost. None of these moments become headlines. They simply disappear into another ordinary day. That is why invisible work is so difficult to appreciate until it suddenly stops. The most important contributions are often invisible because they prevent problems instead of solving them after they appear. Every crisis Daniel prevented looked exactly like an ordinary day to everyone else. Success rarely announces itself. Failure almost always does. That is why people often underestimate those who quietly keep everything working. Only when the system begins to fail do they realize how much depended on one person. But this story is not really about offices. The same pattern appears almost everywhere. Parents, friends, partners, teachers, quiet people shape our lives without becoming the center of attention. They rarely ask to be noticed. They simply keep showing up every single day. Consistency is easy to ignore because it never demands your attention. Yet consistency is often the quiet force that allows everything else to keep moving forward. But being needed is not always the same as being respected. Many people only discover your importance when they can no longer rely on your presence. That doesn't always mean they truly valued you. Sometimes they simply miss what you provided. Missing a solution is very different from appreciating the person who created it. Real respect exists long before someone walks away. It recognizes quiet effort while it is still happening. It doesn't wait until the empty chair becomes impossible to ignore, because appreciation delayed for too long often arrives as regret. And regret is one of the most expensive emotions people ever experience. Not because it changes the past, but because it never can. Weeks after Daniel left, his phone finally rang. It was his former manager. For the first time in 5 years, someone described everything he had actually been doing. His reliability, his patience, his ability to keep people working together. The company even offered him more money to come back. For a moment, it sounded like respect. But then he asked himself one simple question. Had they changed? Or had the situation simply become uncomfortable without him? He realized they understood the cost of losing him. They had not learned how to value him while he was there, so Daniel politely declined. Not because he wanted revenge, because he finally understood his own value. Weeks later, the company divided Daniel's responsibilities between 3 different employees. Only then did everyone understand how much one quiet person had really been carrying. The truth had never changed, only their perspective had. Sometimes absence doesn't increase someone's value. It simply removes everything that was hiding it, and that is the pattern hidden inside so many ordinary lives. Daniel's story feels personal, but it was never only about Daniel. Almost everyone has known someone whose value became obvious only after they were gone. A coworker, a friend, a parent, a partner. People who quietly carried more than anyone realized, not because they wanted recognition, but because someone had to do it. Maybe someone like that is already part of your own life. Maybe you've simply become so used to their presence that you no longer see everything they do. And maybe one day, their absence will explain what their presence never could. By then, appreciation may arrive, but the moment to express it could already be gone. That is why the right time to recognize someone's value is never after they leave. There is a strange pattern that repeats itself in offices, friendships, families, and relationships. The people who hold everything together are often the last ones anyone notices. Not because they matter less, but because they are always there. Familiarity slowly hides what consistency quietly builds. Sometimes the greatest mistake is believing there will always be another chance to say thank you, because one day the chair is empty and the opportunity is gone. Value doesn't begin when someone leaves. That's simply when we finally notice it. The lesson was never about absence. It was always about attention. Notice the people who quietly make your life easier while they're still beside you, because appreciation given today is worth far more than regret tomorrow. Maybe the most valuable people in your life aren't the loudest ones. They're simply the ones who never stopped showing up. If someone quietly makes your life easier every day, don't wait until they're gone to realize it, because by the time absence reveals the truth, the chance to say thank you may already be gone. Sometimes the greatest act of appreciation is simply noticing someone before the silence begins. The archive will remain open as long as stories like this continue to repeat.